Hey, and welcome to the Weed Out, where we weed out the bullshit and talk about the nonsense in our backyard. I'm Spencer Fox Peterson, as always, with my partner, Joanna May Booty.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing today, Joanna?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, enjoying the spring weather, and happy to be moving forward, progress, and just want to welcome everybody to the show. And this week, as always, we're always trying to highlight uh productive and progressive things in a way. So instead of our doom and gloom about the police, we're gonna be talking with Will from one of the editors, and he runs the Shoestring, which we quote a lot, and we've actually written for the Shoestring, and we have a good relationship with them. So full disclosure, but they're doing great journalism, and it's independent, and it's ethical and thoughtful, and we appreciate their work. So we wanted to share the Shoestring and where they're going with the audience. So please go to theshoestring.org. We'll also, as always, post all this information in our show notes at theweedout.com, which we make it as transparent as possible. And that's why we like independent journalists like the Shoestring, which is Will's going to tell us a lot more about it. So before I keep rambling on, Will, welcome. How are you doing today? And what's going on?
Yeah. Hey, Spencer. Hey, Joanna. Thank you guys both so much for having me. My name's Will. I'm one of the co-editors of the Shoestring. We have a small crew, but we work pretty collaboratively on all the pieces that go out. As the sort of name implies, it's not I think from a pretty scrappy beginning about 5 years ago, we've just been we made a website and just started publishing stuff. And I think as the years have gone on, we've gotten a little more consistent and professional. And we hope that the sort of journalism offer an additional perspective to some of the daily journalism that's happening with sort of disinvestment in local news across the country. We see, having a community-based, not-for-profit, not advertising-based model as something that is necessary to sort of keep our eyes on what's happening in the community.
Thank you for being a part of the community, Will, for everyone involved. I know working like Spencer and I mentioned, we've wrote articles and we've worked, like you said, with a number of people when we're going through the editing process and getting things out. 5 years, I feel like, is an awesome amount of time that you guys have been around. Does it feel like it's been that long to you? Because it doesn't to me. I remember when I found you, I was so excited because it felt like a fresh of breath air. There are only a few other independent papers or online news organizations in the area, so it felt like, oh, okay, great, this organization may look at things that others don't, and I feel like you all definitely did that. And I don't think it's necessarily a bias or anything where you're focusing on one particular issue necessarily in the community, but I would like to know, how do you get, so do people just give you ideas and you decide? Do you have certain things you focus on? And I guess, how do you come up with where you're going to focus for and that a release or an article?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's just sort of all of the above. People come to us with stories, or we get tips. Sometimes people are like, there's this thing happening. You guys have to send somebody, you guys have to cover it. Sometimes Dusty, who I think you mentioned, one of our reporters, he loves to just go into state records, appeal logs, and see if there's any cases in there. We look for court documents and places like that. Shelby, another one of our reporters, is a huge public records nerd. And, the UMass privatization stuff, they emailed us a bunch of times. And we heard from them that way. But we're in touch with people in the community, and they're telling us what's happening, and we're just always trying to keep up with what's happening. But we're also historically, something that we have tried to do consistently, and I wish that we had the capacity and the resources to do this on a larger scale, but is to just follow like what's happening in like Northampton city government. We have done stories about Greenfield and Holyoke and East Hampton and some other places as well, but just going to the meeting every week, you're like, oh shoot, they have like a new contract with a weapons company that we didn't know about previously, or information tech company that is doing some shady things in Israel. Like, maybe we should look into this, but also like more mundane things too. Like, I think just like how money is being allocated to different departments, and like what federal money is coming into the municipality. I think that like if you start just like going to your meeting, which are long and tedious and oftentimes like pretty dry. The Northampton City Council in particular, has a talent for like a 6-hour meeting that goes until 1:30 or 2 in the morning. Sometimes hour 4 they like get into something interesting. And I think, and you don't always like know what's happening unless you like sit through it. People are experiencing things, in their workplaces or in their housing situations or police or whatever, and they inform us of that. And I wish that we had more resources to really just follow everything that we got. But the truth is that we are a small team that is comparatively like doesn't have the staff of some of the larger newspapers in the area.
Thank you for pointing out too that we always talk about this in other episodes, that just sometimes going to a town meeting or doing a records request, and we have a few episodes on how to do those, really helps understand maybe what's going on in the community. And so you mentioned Shelby Lee. They're actually my cousin.
Oh, no way.
And I'm so proud of them for all the good work that they do. And they are one of the people that I'm someone who always just goes to town meetings once I am in a community, and they are very much like that. And I'm just so thankful that there's someone in East Hampton that like will pull the records, and Shelby will always let me know what they did and how they did it. So they're such an awesome resource, and I just have to give them a shout out too, because they're family.
Yeah, and a great reporter, no doubt.
Oh, fantastic. The last reporting they did on the use of force in East Hampton, I thought was phenomenal. People tend to think, and this is just something that I think, you'll find too, and it's not just the police. Like you said, you get you get to find out when you look in meetings like this, like where all the budgetary monies are going. And so I think it's important for people to realize that it's not just maybe a town like Holyoke or a town like Greenfield, where right now you see maybe 6-hour meetings like Northampton too. But there in Pittsfield there are issues, in East Hampton there are issues, in Northampton there are issues, in towns that seem really progressive, and sometimes other news organizations may not think to cover things there. And I really love that the Shoestring goes above and beyond in covering really all of the local communities. And like, I just want to say for those listeners out there that would like to, if you're someone who's out there and you have something about records request wise, please reach out to the Shoestring. I think that's how I got involved with Spencer, and we found Will and started writing articles. I think if you have some information and the editors and the Shoestring finds it interesting, and Will, please correct me if I'm wrong, they may have you write a piece for them. And that's something I really love too, that it shows people that anyone can step into this space and not necessarily become a journalist right away, but be almost like a real journalist on the street, and find the information and report it to the community. And you provide that editing and that help and that platform along the way. So I would urge people to reach out to you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we definitely try to be as inclusive as possible, and to always take on new people. But I think that you're right. Like, anybody who's in the community should be present and paying attention to the community. If they have something that they think the larger community should know about, we would love to know about it. You should definitely drop us a line. We're at theshoestringmag@gmail.com.
For me, this is usually how these interviews go. Joanna is the the anchor of the interview, and I'm kind of the working class surrogate audience voice. I take that mantle. What I think about local journalism and participating in it, and this is how we abolish carceral and punitive systems. We hold each other accountable. We share information that's truthful, that can be backed by facts, not conjecture, just truth. And following that North Star is how we keep our community safe ultimately. Because if we know that there's shady business practices that are hurting workers and ultimately hurting the consumer, if it's going unreported, people are going to keep walking into that proverbial meat grinder of a shitty corporation, you know, whether it's like one of these cannabis facilities in Holyoke or whatever. And it's how we hold people in our community responsible. And it doesn't have to be like we're going to throw everybody bad person in jail.
That wouldn't be carceral accountability, or maybe that is carceral accountability.
I guess, but you know, speaking truth is what keeps things healthy and safe, and can't be gate kept. Everybody has to be included for it to feel transparent and truthful. So I mean, the model of the shoestring, in my opinion, is really revolutionary, because it's, yes, we need to make our rent, pay our bills, eat, right? But it's not about getting clicks. It's about speaking truth. The community will rally around that ultimately. And this is like as old as humankind, as long as there's been forms of communication.
No,
So-
I think you're right, Spencer, and I think you sort of hit the nail on the head. You know, for better or for worse, we have never really been motivated by clicks, and just by getting the stories out that we think are important. And I think one of the things that sort of surprises me of doing that sort of editorial work that we do is that, like, the pieces that you think are going to be like the viral pieces that expose a politician or whatever, people seem to ignore them, and then the piece that you think is just going to be kind of a not that popular go super viral. Of course, if Eric Sewer's involved, those pieces do extremely well. But
even we have an episode about Eric Sewer, crash course from a worker's perspective, and it's that I don't want to give that man any more airtime. Thank you for doing the work on that and continuing to hold him accountable and his businesses accountable, along with other people doing work.
Well, do credit where credit is due. I mean, the reason that he was in the news recently is because the city was holding him accountable.
Right.
Not some,
Everybody's sick of
independent
him.
journalists.
Everybody's sick of him.
It's like, it's the one thing that we really got, it's something that we really have common ground with some of the politicians in town with.
I think everybody across every spectrum can agree, if they've spent enough time in Northampton, they're like, or the Valley in general. As a working class person, it's revolutionary to participate in truth telling. It's not about muckraking. It's not about, like, the facts are sometimes these things that are happening are genuinely awful and harmful to our psyche, our communities, individuals, and without some sunlight, it doesn't get solved. So thank you for sharing. And I encourage everybody to go to the shoestring.org, check out their work. Any sort of extra money laying around, they could use it. It helps everything, because we can pay people to eat and live, and they can do the work of digging through court documents and asking questions of politicians and sitting through town meetings. I'm grateful that town meetings are recorded, because I don't have time to sit through that shit. So, like, at the very least, shout out to, like, write your local town, even if you don't go to the meetings a lot, just write out to your politicians before every session, be like, keep the online forum, because these people want to, Holyoke's been trying to talk about getting rid of doing, limiting the online capabilities, not getting rid of it, but like limiting it. And it's an accessibility thing. So, like, at the very least, if we can just get eyeballs on it, maybe the next day, having it available as soon as possible, or not limiting people comment from a phone line, because that's how they keep us silent. Always advocate for more transparency, I guess. So that way journalists and other people can more efficiently do their work. You know, there's other ways you can help us out.
Sure, absolutely.
So I'm remiss. This is an abolitionist based podcast, so I would love to hear more of your thoughts on Dusty's work regarding the Holyoke Police specifically, but also John McGee.
Yeah, you guys want to talk about the?
Yeah, I was hoping to like just, you know, because we focus a lot. Holyoke's government and police are just every day. It feels like every week, even Mass Live and WWLP, who spin it in the most neutral to positive view for the cops, and it's usually about giving them more money. It's every week, and I just applaud the work of Dusty for putting up with them, because Joanna and I have spent a lot of time trying to get records from Holyoke, and they're reluctant, to say the least.
To say the least.
I mean, I think the most recent piece is about the Holyoke cop who pointed a gun at his fellow officer's car.
And the one before that was the complaints that had come in over the last 10 years, Will, where
Is that the NEPM story?
Yeah, I don't think that was.
Sorry.
Yeah, so that story came out in NEPM, and I think that the exposed, kind of typical. You guys might be more familiar with the stuff that it exposed than I am.
LAPDs just came out, and they basically ignore like up to like 6,000 complaints a year. Just straight up ignore. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting way to sort of have community safety if you're gonna, ignore complaints and that kind of stuff. Let me pull up Dusty's piece so we can talk about it.
Oh no, we can talk since you're more in. You don't have to. We can speak more on his piece about the officer, the sergeant, I believe, that pointed a weapon at two detectives, whether in an unmarked car. I always joke that the whole thing, the reason that sergeant for pointing the gun is in more trouble, he didn't endanger lives, he endangered property. Because he pointed the gun at that was their excuse. Well, he didn't point the gun at the officers, he pointed it at the front tire or something. I forget the exact detail, but the reason they're not taking his gun license and his right to be an officer is because, well, he didn't point it at them, he pointed at property. And you're just kind of like, I don't know, if I was out waving my gun, I'm pretty sure my LTC is getting revoked.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's that much to add. Dusty was able to get the report via public records request, and we were the first one to sort of break the story. And I think that
tell us about the reaction that you get when you publish a story like that. I guess is really we're really curious about, like, do you get a lot of clicks on it, for example, or what is the pushback from the official agencies that it's exposing?
I mean, I think that official agencies in these types of situations, like, they don't like talking about this stuff, and like 9 times out of 10 they don't respond to requests for comment. They don't have anything to say. They're just like, either I think something's under investigation. They're like, it's an investigation, we can't talk about it. If it's a record, they're like, oh, well, we're not going to talk about it. And I think a lot of response to some of this stuff, like, is, I think the officials try to be sort of as quiet as possible. I mean, left and right, I think a big sort of difference between like what we do and like what other outlets do is that, like, we don't necessarily care about like access to politicians and police chiefs, and we are more getting our stories from the community and public records and that sort of thing. And I think that when you're relying on those types of sources to give you your stories, you can't necessarily like be as critical, but then you don't get the same access to some stories. So it's definitely a trade-off and I think a different approach for sure. So I think that's sort of how that happened.
Yeah, and I was just more, and also just to follow up, police and police unions are powerful, right? When you start rattling cages, it's hard. So that's why it's really important to have the facts right. It's extra important. It's extra critical. Truth talks, bullshit walks. So if you're going after powerful people who are kind of scary, in my opinion,
and they have guns.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And they can wave them at their coworkers and keep their gun. Like, I don't know. If I wave my gun at my neighbor, I'm pretty sure the gun is getting taken away, and probably for good fucking reason. Like, I've proven not to be safe with this thing.
Yeah, that story was really, I think, a wonderful story. I'm thankful that Dusty and the Shoestring released that story, because if, as a citizen, and I don't want anyone pointing a gun at someone else, but I do want to like just say to the audience, like, if you even had a registered gun and like pointed it at a cop car or a cop, imagine what would probably happen. And I just think it's scary that the police would still keep this person working with a gun. And there's just, so that report was very, it's not surprising to me, but I'm just thankful to know that information. And Spencer mentioned John McGee and Greenfield. I live in Montague. I'm so thankful for John starting to report on that, because Will, I had reached out to you. I remember when the Greenfield stuff was stirring at the very beginning, and John was someone who I would reach out to and talk to. I'm glad he started doing reporting for the Shoestring, because he is attending those meetings and really getting so much information. And I don't know if you'd want to talk a little bit about the recent Greenfield police backtrack on night shift cuts. But the Greenfield police do a lot of scare tactics like Holyoke, where they're trying right now to really keep the city afraid so that they feel needed.
Sure. I mean, I think that you sort of hit the nail on the head. I think the sort of news there is that Chief Robert High, who was found guilty of racial discrimination, I think back in May, the sort of money that was used to pay for that lawsuit was taken, some might say correctly, like from the police department. When that sort of thing happens, you know, morale can suffer within the department. And you know, I think this sort of, he was then reinstated, I think at the end of last year, maybe in November. Maybe you remember better than me, Joanna. But
It
you know,
was, I think he was reinstated in the fall. I can't remember exactly though. It was a while. He had leave for like the whole
Yeah.
summer, basically.
My mind is fuzzy on how all this works in general, though.
Yeah, and you know, I think that there's this, you know, I think the more traditional media just reported that the Greenfield was, you know, cutting the night shift and to, you know, be terrified, and they didn't report any of the sort of context of what happened within the sort of police budget and the racial discrimination suit, which we reported on back in the spring as well, which I think you guys reported on as well. So yeah, I mean, I think John's reporting sort of, you know, he goes sort of meticulously through the city council meeting, like where they announced that this was going to happen. And the councilors, I think, reaction to it, which, you know, I think the mayor backed up the police chief, and they said, we're going to cut the police shift from, I think, midnight to 7 a.m. and there's nothing you can do about it. And, you know, I think city councilors complain that, you know, when something like this happens, the police, I think they're like, writes a blurb. It doesn't give us like any information about how they came to this decision. But if the library's budget changes, you know, they get a whole report and that they get all this information to sort of inform their decision. But, you know, I think councilors rightfully sort of accused Chief High of making this decision in haste without a lot of information and sort of what happens. I'm going back to the report here.
Yeah, I watched that meeting too, Will, and eventually I had to go to bed. So I was thankful that John, I could go back and watch it and that John reported. But the counselors were very, I feel like they felt offended, and I would have too, because it's so much work as a counselor. And you'd assume that the chief of police in that leadership role would have thought through the process really sincerely. And the staffing issues that were coming up had like, he had known about them for a while prior, so it wasn't like a surprise that there were going to be people leaving the force, etc. And a lot of the counselors were very frustrated that they had to be there and be basically spoken to in the tone that they were, and given a plan that was really kind of not optimal at all.
Sure. And I think something that like High said to the council in the night that he announced that he was, you know, cutting the night shift was that like the information was already on Facebook. And I think, you know, as you're reporting on the Greenfield police using their Facebook page to sort of bully city councilors and bully the public into support for the police, like, I think one counselor said, I don't do my business on Facebook. And, the police department also acknowledged that many of their Facebook followers are not even residents of Greenfield. And we see this, I think, in Northampton too, where the police department sort of advocate for specific political policies, like, via social media, and not like in public forums that are as easily like made public if you're not looking for it.
Hey, make a point on that. The amount of gaslighting Joanna and I have personally experienced talking to, whether they're police chiefs or local officials or all the way to state officials, about the role of social media. They and like, representatives of civilian oversight boards even have said something along the lines, we want to hear what the police have to say. So we want to hear directly from them. In my head, that's basically what birthed the weed out, is because when a civilian oversight board said that I will only listen to truth from them and not a third party, that's asking questions and digging up dirt. Like, I don't want to listen to media. My head almost exploded, because I was like, wait, what? We're just going to take their story, any entity story, doesn't matter what it is, and we're just going to run with it as the truth. That's how you're making your fucking decisions. And that's why you're advocating. And this police oversight audit that Holyoke, they're basically advocating that they need a bigger PR team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. And I think, there was a sort of a similar thing happened in Northampton a couple of years ago. And this is like OG, like, 2018 Shoestring, but, the police chief wanted capital budget to expand, their suite of like riot gear to police, like, her words were to be used at like the Blarney blowout at UMass when they like provide assistance to other departments. She created this quote unquote like memo, justifying the use of these various police chief Jody Casper of Northampton to justify purchases, and it just did not line up to how those helmets and batons and shields and not stun guns.
Tasers?
No, not tasers. Those are stun guns. When they do like a little, it's like a rubber
Bullet one?
Rubber bullet. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And how all that stuff was going to be used. And the politicians were like, oh, she wrote a memo, this must be exactly correct. There's big discrepancies, and having reporters like paying attention to that stuff is, I think, really important. But, going back to Greenfield, I think during public comment, when High announced that they were going to get rid of the night shift, the public described the presentation as fear baiting, a hit job, a stunt designed to induce pain compliance. And, one person said that he covered a lot of ground and was kind of hard to follow with no supplementary materials. And one, I think, counselor said that, he isn't trying to solve this problem. He said he saw it coming for months and did nothing.
Yeah, they have a lot of, and this is good time, remind people that there's not a grand scheme or conspiracy. This is about power and control of a budget. It's really simple. And we're dealing with entities that have been given a lot of power and money consistently, and they're used to this. So any pushback feels like a threat. And then in turn, they turn around and threaten the community, which these community members have clearly pointed out, right? And it's okay that you don't feel comfortable questioning these people, but this is like my shout out to anybody listening. Read, share, talk to your neighbors about local media, because they do this work. They're the ones that will help shape, and we hold each other accountable, and that's how we do it. I just cannot reiterate enough that it's really important to support local media, local journalists doing this work and highlighting these injustices and ways we can make the world better, and by listening to others and sharing their ideas. So, Will, again, can you just like plug where to go for everybody?
Yeah. You can check out our reporting at theshoestring.org. We also have a podcast, which is a lot less consistent than the Weed Out. It's called Tripping on the Shoestring. You can search that on your podcast app. So check out the website. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that sort of fun, never boring social media. But honestly, like if you're interested in our work, the best thing that you can do is to go to our website, theshoestring.com, click subscribe, and just sign up for our newsletter. That just means that, like, if Facebook decides that, we're, that they want to kick us off their platform for whatever reason, that means you're still going to be able to hear from us. And that makes just sort of a huge difference in building kind of base building and staying engaged, because we don't have any control over the algorithm, but we have a newsletter, and I think that makes a huge difference. We'll do a end of the year fundraising campaign, and that will be like a little bit annoying, but for the most part, we just send out like the work that we're doing to that same point, supporting the organization so that we can continue to do reporting and to pay people and to dig into things that are not being dug into otherwise, like a little bit of financial support, if you're able to, also helps. That being said, like, we don't put anything behind a paywall or anything like that.
I was gonna say, please give the Shoestring money. They deserve to be here and helping us, and they deserve the funds that they need to do that. So if you're able to do and give anything financially, I know Will may not say it as loudly as I will, but please give them your money. And if you can't give them your money, please share, subscribe, like, follow, and give them a boost on those platforms so that people who may be able to give them funds can do so. And I just wanted to say about Greenfield, because it's actually a little bit of good news. After I recently heard, and I don't know if it's been reported, or will be reported by you, Will. So I'm sorry if I'm releasing something, but it's been reported already. Counselor from Precinct 3, Virginia, Jenny DeSorger, and I'm sorry if I'm saying her last name wrong. I've spoke to her a few times, and she's a wonderful person. She's going to be running for mayor against the current mayor in the upcoming election. I don't actually know if the current mayor will be running, but I'm really excited to see that the city councilor will be throwing their hat in the ring. So I just wanted to put that out there too, because I think some of the councilors have had enough.
So that's news to me, and I look forward to learning more and following the campaign. And we're really excited that there are people who are paying close attention in Greenfield, like yourself, like John McGee. And we look forward to just continuing to follow the story. So yeah, thank you guys for hosting me, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely, anytime.
And just so everybody knows, and everybody listening, the weedout.com, like the Shoestring, you can go there, and any links or any relevant information, articles we reference will be in the show notes, which is also posted on our Substack, which you can subscribe to. So again, if everything's moving too fast, or it's going to be organized somewhere and you can go look for it. We don't talk out our ass, and we appreciate everybody tuning in. Support local media. And Will, thank you so much for helping us out, coming on, and truly being one of, not to bootlick too much, but like your publication that you work on is what inspired and gave Joanna and I the voice, I guess, to like work together, so I mean, thank you.
That's awesome. I it's so cool that, like, people connect with the work that we do, and I think that makes it all like worth it at the end of the day. So that means a lot to me, and to, I think, the rest of the organization too.
I wouldn't mind highlighting the story about East Hampton that Shelby Lee worked on, because I think they really, as someone who lives in that community as a disabled non-binary person with their spouse, who I know they really just care about community so much and people's safety. So I think when I read that story, and people who live in East Hampton and Northampton, you often think, if you're not someone who is subjected to use of force or the police because you haven't had any encounters with them, you may not know that these things are happening in your small town. Reading Shelby's piece was, like I said, I thought they did an incredible job. But I wouldn't mind if you shared a little about that and talked a little bit. Yeah, I think East Hampton is also home, or closer to home for you too, Will.
Yeah, I live in East Hampton, so
Yeah.
it's been nice, getting to cover East Hampton more, and working with Shelby, especially on this piece. But as I mentioned previously, Shelby is just a wealth of knowledge and just very dialed into every tiny detail of what's going on in city politics. And I'll just say that in at least one case, maybe as this piece speaks to, I think they have a better idea of what's happening than perhaps even the mayor. So
Absolutely.
and I think that it's important to have that type of perspective. As far as like what the piece reveals itself is that there's sort of discrepancies between how the police is using force and sort of like what happens on their incident reports versus like what gets reported as part of the department's like use of force policy. So what Shelby did was request incident reports. Well, I think what they did first is they requested like the department like log of use of force, and then went and requested the specific incident reports and found like pretty dramatic discrepancies between the two things. And the piece sort of digs into the details. And I think read the piece to understand it better. But I'm just going to read couple paragraphs here. The Shoestrings analysis of EPD's use of force reports after action reports and officer incidents narratives appeared to show inconsistency in reporting from April 2021 to December 2022. In one example of an incident that occurred on April 2nd, 2021, 4 EPD officers were present and reported in their narrative that they used multiple types of force, but only one use of force was filed for the use of the laser display of an electronic control weapon or a stun gun. In other words, pointing the weapon's red targeting dot at a person. And then, what Shelby reveals is that they, officers used physical force, brought a woman to the ground. They also pushed someone into another room, and then there was another stun gun display. So what sort of got reported as part of like the department policy was a lot less than the force that they used. And sort of this sort of use of force policy that Shelby is reporting on was part of a suite of police reforms that came in the wake of the George Floyd related uprisings 3 years ago. So I think paying attention to sort of how the dust has settled from that, and I think we're going to have more reporting sort of in that similar vein coming up, but sort of reporting like how the dust has settled from that, and sort of politicians were like, oh, we're going to sort of change how things are done, and in reality, like there are still many of our readers and many people in the community think that there's more that needs to change. So, following that story and, sort of moving funding away from the police is still a story that we're following and we'll continue to follow.
Thank you for following those stories, Will. And this is not the shoestring saying this, but that story also really, for me, shows cops lie. They often do not tell the truth. So when the media, unlike independent journalism, just spews out a press release from the cops, unlike what Shelby did and what the Shoestring does all the time, you all aren't just listening to the base level information straight from the cop's mouth. And this report really shows that you really sometimes have to do some digging.
And shout out to Shelby, who because of Joanna, Joanna knows Shelby. I know Shelby. I am very intrigued, and this is they pointed out to me that East Hampton, for example, in their many records requests, they found out East Hampton police have grenade launchers, and I know they're outfitted to like be less lethal beanbag rounds, whatever. But like, think about it. Your local Podunk PD has grenade launchers, and Holyoke PD won't tell us what they have in their arsenal at all. So that Shelby really illuminated something to me, and I was like, oh yeah, we should be able to ask what kind of weapons y'all got.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right, Spencer. And what kind of capabilities the police have and why is super critical and important. I think another sort of records journalist who lives in the Berkshires named Seth Kirshner, who we did a couple pieces with, not for a couple of years now, but he was very apt to sort of cover and follow SWAT teams in Western Mass. He did a big expose for the Gazette, or not the Gazette, the Valley Advocate, about that. And that stuff is pretty fishy and shady, but I totally agree that like people should know what kind of weapons the departments have and why they're using them. We have covered the Northampton Police's use of drones, and sort of the dishonesty around the disclosure of even having them. For a long time, they said that we need them to show crime scenes, and then we did more records requests, and it showed that they're actually using them to surveil multiple protests like in 1 week or whatever. Like it's just typical sort of not super surprising that that's how they're using them.
So Will, before we wrap this up with you, we kind of would love to know where the Shoestring's heading. So if you could just give us a quick wrap about that, that'd be awesome.
We did a lot of work to just like grow our organization. We took on a fundraising person, Sherilyn, who has been really helpful. My colleague, Brian has done a lot more within the organization, and we started working with Dusty, and we assembled a board of advisors, and we got affiliated with the Institute for Nonprofit News. We got a fiscal sponsorship, which allows us to take tax deductible donations. And we've just done like a lot of like, just sort of like, strategic planning and like boring nonprofit stuff that has allowed us to, imagine being able to continue to like fund and do this work, not just completely on like a, activist burnout kind of level. So that has been like really exciting and gratifying. And I think that, going forward, we hope to like maybe raise a little bit more money so we can, just continue to, do the journalism that, I think has impacted you guys and we think is very, important for the community to have. So I think that, going forward, we would like to just see the organization continue to grow in a way that allows us to do more reporting. Like that's, I think, our only goal. We're not hoping to, become some part of the nonprofit industrial complex or whatever. But, I think just kind of figuring out how to navigate that has been, what we've been working on. Check us out on the computer or the phone, wherever you get your information feed.
Yes, please check out the Shoestring and please give them money. And thank you to all, I would consider them my colleagues who write for the Shoestring, who do great work there. Thank you so much for all you do. And thank you, Will, for all you do. I really appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you guys too.
Such hard work.
No. And thank you guys for doing the podcast and for having me on. And, I hope the episode is a good episode, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you very much for being our guest. And as always, we'll continue to be in touch.